with the weekend of games behind us. There's lots to talk about. People are sad, people are crying, people are hugging each other. But we've got something special lined up for you tonight. Jordan, what is that special something tonight?
100 Talk Podcast, baby. We're
100
back.
Talk Podcast, yes. Nothing special about our show, is there? Huh?
I know. I was taking the bait on that one. We have a special guest. We have a very special guest, Mr. Jackson Dahl. We've long admired Jackson and appreciate the work he's done for the team that we love. And we asked him to join us today, and we just wished and hoped that we would be talking under different circumstances. But this is where we find ourselves. And it seems like a good time for just a quick chat. Jackson's been doing a ton in the last week just to connect with the community and talk about where we're at, what's going on, the state of things. And so we were really hoping that he'd be able to join us, even if just briefly, to talk about the games that happened Saturday and Sunday this week. So he has graced us with that presence. And
I think the timing is good, right? Because he did the Ask Me Anything segment during his Academy stream where he took questions off Twitter and Reddit. And unfortunately, he was a little bit handcuffed by the situation and couldn't say quite as much as perhaps he was going to say with the Soligo substitution. And we know that that's going to be probably the main topic of tonight. Soligo and what else is going on for the rest of this split. So hopefully now that obviously that roster change happened and we saw it play out for a couple of days. So now Jackson's a little bit more free to give his perspective on that. So without further ado, let's bring on the man, the legend, the jawline, Jackson Dahl. Welcome, buddy. How are you?
Am I here? Am I live?
You're here. You're here. You're live. You're talking
to
the
guys?
Beautiful people.
It has been a long time coming. I was hoping to join this show for the first time in a slightly better kind of overall team mood. And we're hoping for at least one win this weekend to come in and chat. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Still really excited to be here. Big fan of you guys. I think I was probably the first one on the 100 Thieves side to actually find you guys last summer. And we've got a lot of listeners, so
man,
really glad to be here.
Beautiful. That's just a beautiful thing to say.
Yeah.
What that touches my heart deeply.
Well, we appreciate you not just dumpstering us as soon as you heard the first episode, because I think last summer we were probably still trying to figure out just the basics.
Fair enough. But I don't know. I think what immediately stood out to me was, and granted, probably somewhat of a biased take, but also a very thoughtful take, which I think is pretty rare in the league community. So I think it was around the time we traded Medios. Obviously, there was a lot of conversation happening on the internet, and I like the approach you guys took, and it's been fun to follow the road as you guys have grown, and this has become more of a thing.
Yeah, man. Sure. Thanks for saying that, dude. That means a lot to us on the struggle pod over here, trying to do what we do.
Oh man, I wish it weren't.
Well, look, we've got a lot to talk about. Jackson is not going to be with us during the full show, so we have a series of questions that we're going to have for him. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation, and then we will release him into the wild to frolic and be free, and to spend the rest of his time trying to solve.
Weeping and trying to solve.
Yeah. Well, don't do too much weeping, man.
Sunday night,
allow us to weep for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. Obviously, like I said, the big thing is Soligo. Soligo making his debut in the LCS this week. Kind of a long anticipated move, at least from a community perspective. So before we talk about how he actually performed, we just wanted to get your take on, what was the team looking to do? What were they looking to achieve with putting him in for Huhi? And what specific aspects of the game were you hoping to address with that roster move?
Sure. I guess I would maybe back up even a little bit more and kind of talk about our approach coming into the season and one of the reasons we picked up Soligo. Obviously, getting a new resident North American mid laner is a very large challenge and something kind of every team's trying to figure out. We had less success with our kind of development last year, and we were looking at a couple of guys coming into this year, and the coaches got to work with Soligo during scouting grounds. We're really impressed with him, and particularly his mechanical ability. Was a guy who just like really made some crazy flashy movements and stuff like that at scouting grounds. And then coming into the split, obviously we picked up Huhi. I think the overall approach with Huhi is like just the ultimate team play mid laner. We could spend all night talking about kind of what our attempts and kind of our strategic vision for the team was this year. But overall, I think that was clearly the vision for Huhi. And something we had even talked about and probably had talked about with Huhi was the possibility of running something of a 6-man roster in Summer Split. So that was obviously projecting farther out, but kind of giving Soligo a split to develop and ideally getting to have some flexibility with the type of mid lane or what the mid lane role looks like. And really looking for Soligo to grow in kind of that lane dominant kind of play around the mid lane role. Whereas Huhi, obviously, I think, is at his very best when he's helping the side lanes. So that was kind of the vision at the very beginning. And coming to this week with Soligo is very much not okay, we need to sub out Huhi for Soligo, and then we're just going to be an amazing team. I don't think anybody
Are
was
you
under that
sure?
impression.
Are you sure, man? I think I read that on Reddit.
I'll be honest, like I think we were certainly hoping to get a win this weekend. And I think in hindsight, obviously today was really rough against Cloud9. I think we absolutely should have won yesterday against TSM. Obviously didn't go that way, but at the end of the day, I mean, we were looking, and I alluded to this earlier this week when I was talking about it a bit, but we've been considering changes for a while now, and have a handful of reasons we hadn't made any yet. We definitely hadn't only considered change in the mid lane. I see a lot of people asking about that. We've been looking at the entire team, and our coaches decided based on what we knew about Soligo, what we had seen from his development, Kelsey's feedback as the academy coach, where our kind of strengths and weaknesses were, as well as a few other things we kind of just wanted to learn about to put Soligo in. And what I guess that last note may have been a bit vague. Like one big question for us was you have this super vocal player in Huhi in the mid lane. And we were really curious to see what the team would look like without that voice. And usually people, especially with the team that's struggling in terms of macro and communication, would say, why the heck would you remove one of the bigger voices? But I think we've had so many issues this split that to some extent, obviously we didn't just only want to test, but we did want to test and kind of see how that would affect the other players and the other voices on our team. And also really wanted to kind of see what a slightly more kind of lane dominant, or if not dominant, kind of lane focused player might look like in this game against Bjergsen and Niski, who are two of the stronger mid laners in the league. So again, definitely wasn't we're going to upgrade from Huhi to Soligo or something like that, or he's the clear only change we could make. But it was, we don't want to change everything at once, and let's see what this change will do, see how it affects the team, both in terms of just raw performance, but also in terms of the dynamic and communication and everything.
Yeah. So is that
Champ pool too? Right.
So is as a follow-up, is it fair to say that, you're talking about removing Huhi's voice from the team? Is just like kind of maybe it's a too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing where
Sure.
There's so many voices going on in the comms at one, who do you listen to? Who's the key voice? So maybe
Absolutely.
taking away from the noise is what you're going for?
I think one of the things that I've noticed personally, and this is actually just my opinion, this is coming a little less from the coaches, is it seems like we have a lot of when I listen to comms and I watch practice, we have a lot of communication. It's not that no one's talking necessarily, but there's less decisiveness. So people are saying, should we go in here? I can go in here. Could we go in here? Could we look for this? And not, I'm going in, go, 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 go.
Right.
And I think that was kind of one consideration. Again, because it's just obviously I think our expectations were here, our performance is here, and nobody really knows exactly why, because it feels like there's so many problems and issues. So that was one part of it.
You're in the toothpaste aisle right now, right? Like you look at the toothpaste like, oh my gosh, like there are 400 tubes of toothpaste. Which one?
And probably
Which one
200
do I
that we
choose?
can't see, that we don't even realize.
Yeah,
So,
there-
You got more in the back.
Yeah, right. More in the
for
back.
sure. For sure.
One thing I noticed on the topic of comms and just the overall communication of the team, knowing that Huhi was a more vocal player and has a vocal personality and just, even the way that we see him show up in the heist, right? He speaks his mind. He's always talking in a game. So that was one thing I watched very closely. And one thing I was actually pleasantly surprised with was early on, and we're kind of jumping ahead to game breakdown, but I think this is an interesting point. Early on, I noticed that TSM basically just camped him. And I think
Correct.
their game plan was, we're going to break this guy in the first 10 minutes.
And that's what they did in scrims too. I think we were pretty ready for that.
Yeah.
Expecting that.
So that might kind of get to what I was noticing. The second thing I noticed is we actually reacted incredibly well, and in a way that I feel like I hadn't really seen us do yet this split, which is we had the people in the right place to react, and not in the way that like it was a reactive play. We were proactive in positioning ourselves to be able to take advantage of basically what was Soligo mechanically escaping in a really incredible way some of these gank attempts.
Yeah.
So I feel like what I was not expecting is what I looked at is it seems like we've had communication here in a way that we hadn't necessarily in the past, and that we were reacting really well and proactively to some of these plays that TSM was putting at us.
Sure. I mean, I think Andy had like 3 counter ganks that game. And I think that's probably indicative of a little bit of like, it's not that people aren't talking. People like, there's a lot of people on the cast who are like, oh, is there language issues between Someday and Bang and the other players? Or like, are they translating? Like, that is not happening. Someday and Bang speak English effectively. And the communication or shot calling errors in the later game are a very different story than like, can we effectively do this gank? And obviously we've struggled with that a little bit too. But I think part of it too is just being in a position where we can absorb pressure. And that was something that I think we were looking to see from Soligo. Obviously getting that from a rookie is somewhat risky, but I think
especially against like Bjergsen.
Yeah. Totally. Like, I mean, he was pretty even CS. He forced Bjergsen out of lane a couple times. Obviously that's relatively easy to do with Cinderhold, but for all intents and purposes, he like not only did his job, I think he like crushed his job in the laning phase, which was something that again against Bjergsen is really hard. And he had Aphro and he had Anda and he had his team playing around him. But again, that's what you have to do when they're playing LeBlanc Nocturne and their entire goal is to dive and crush mid lane.
Yeah.
Right. They're camping you nonstop. So, it's going to take more than just you playing well to escape that.
Yeah.
So overall, Jackson, between the 2 games, I mean, we talked about his performance in TSM and we'll talk a little bit about his performance in C9, but overall, do you feel like you got from him what you were going for with the move? Where do you stand on that?
In terms of laning, 100%. Today was a little bit iffier. Lissandra and Desindra is not a great matchup, and I think the reason to go for that over something a little bit more even in lane is just it's really hard to kill Lissandra. We really wanted him to be safe into a Syndra lane. But overall, early stage of the game, it was from the most part what we expected, especially against TSM. In terms of learning about the rest of the team, and hopefully, I think we probably learned a good amount in terms of actually fixing our late game problems or our team fighting kind of aggression problems. That remains to be seen. I think from the outside looking in, it clearly is still relevant. I don't know if 2 game sample size is enough to say like, did this clearly make a difference? So I think on that end, it's still a little bit TBD, and we're still trying to figure things out.
Can you say, I mean, is the plan to keep him in for the next round of games, or are you still experimenting with,
I'm not totally sure. That's a decision I'm actually talking to probably later tonight, and that's a decision our coaching staff's going to have to make. I would say everything is still kind of fair game, and we're probably going to evaluate that again this week and see what happens in scrims and experiment. But yeah, I would say that by no means are we trying to make like big sweeping decisions. At this point, we're struggling too much.
Yeah.
Again, one of the things I kind of picked up on in that note is while I was watching his performance mid, my thought was, the lane dominant thing I think is paying off really well in this matchup, because it means that we're not losing the map through mid, which is honestly, it's a different kind of play style for us in some ways as a team. So it's good to see how that impacted the strat overall. But another thought I had is this guy could actually abuse somebody pretty hard in mid lane, I think. Like, I think he is going to outplay people in a way that we haven't seen. So it'd be interesting to see whether or not he plays in weeks to come, how he does in a matchup where he's not against one of the bigger name mid laners.
I don't love to talk about scrim results, but I can say that with confidence, that is definitely something that's happened in scrims against weaker mid laners. So certainly wasn't expecting him to come in and solo kill Bjergsen or Niski.
He got reasonably close on Bjergsen. He did.
Sure.
I want to say he got less than 100 HP close.
Yeah, can I clarify, though? I mean, you said in scrims, you mean LCS level scrims?
Yes, this week against other teams.
Yeah, as he's getting ready. Okay, well, that's certainly a good sign for him. I mean, being a rookie, it's just such a big question mark.
For sure.
I think during the TSM game the casters were talking about it, and they said, if Jensen's debut against Bjergsen, he was down 80 CS or whatever, so it's kind of good to see the kid, do well in my estimation. And obviously like you've pointed out, it's not okay, problems are over, but at least
not at all. And I mean, to be totally frank, I think he definitely struggled today in the Syndra matchup. Not shocking, and I think most people will struggle with Sandra into Syndra. But again, we at the end, like, the fact that he was even reasonably close both games, I think is like tracking with expectations and hopes even. Because again, we've seen guys come in their first game, and Max is somebody he played in collegiate and then 2 months of academy and is playing in LCS. So not a lot of experience. And for the most part, I would say had a lot of composure, and for that alone, I was really proud of him.
Yeah.
He definitely has a lot of places he can improve. But
put the Chopin on, got in his zone.
Yeah, exactly.
Just showed up and he did work.
But hey, let me point out, he was up on CS at 20 minutes into this game. So
he was. I think there were some other kind of
there's stuff going on.
Bit.
Yeah.
He was chunked out really hard, really early, I think at level 1, which makes things hard.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not going to claim to be the micro league expert in terms of laning phase or any of that, but I think again he did pretty well, and I think is only going to continue to improve as a player.
Yeah,
I do want to give a quick shout out. Touch My Coconuts in chat says that he made Soligo made 2 very noticeable saves, and that was something I noticed in his game too. So when things weren't quite going our way, he would show up and through some pretty high level mechanics, just change the course of a fight, which I think is, again, that's another thing where, as Cole and I have talked about Hui in the past, we haven't really picked up on those kinds of things as much I think until you see somebody doing it, it's like, oh, that's value that I wasn't expecting we would get here, but it was good
for sure.
See. And
I think Hui has also looked very good on Lissandra. And I think that's probably, there are certain champions, one in particular, I think we didn't play this weekend, but there's certain champions where players just have different strengths. So
yeah,
that's fair. Okay, and so like earlier I asked, kind of if you guys were planning on keeping Soligo as part of this thing moving forward, and you said you're going to review that and make those decisions with the coaching staff this week. But outside of Soligo, are you guys still looking at things like, say, Fragus is somebody who's been suggested a lot as a replacement for Anda? Is that something that's on the table too? Are you able to speak to that at all?
I can't speak for who's playing this weekend. In terms of experimentation with the roster, I would say that that's definitely still something that's on the table, especially as the play up. I would say that basically now we're in a position where if we 4-0, we have a chance of making playoffs, which is a tough situation. So it's definitely not a situation where we just want to call the split. But I trust that our coaches will experiment this week and make the decisions that's best going forward. I think Fragus and Andy are very, very different players.
Yes.
Which is one of the reasons that fans have been calling for Fragus to change. And I think I want to stress it, and I think most fans get it, is it's very rarely are we trying to make this like, okay, this player is better than this player. It's just like, how can we change the dynamic of things? And I think Fragus is a overall probably more volatile player, if I had to say. Partially due to inexperience and partially due to aggression.
Yes, he's very aggressive early.
Yeah, but has looked really good in some academy games too. So I think we've been really happy with a lot of our academy guys' development. Somebody who probably doesn't get a lot of talk for pretty clear reasons in terms of coming up to LCS is Fake God. Like Fake God has been amazing this academy split. He's 18. He's been growing a ton. Stunt, Prismal, those guys, like, they're all growing. So sometimes too, it's about kind of where the needs are, how different the change might be, voice, all these things. So it's hard to pinpoint. And I wish I could be like, here's exactly what we're thinking and here's who we're probably going to play this week. But I think that that's something I'm going to kind of defer to our coaches. And I don't know if those decisions have even firmly been made yet as we evaluate all this.
Also, probably not a great strategic move to tip your hand that much. Go so people know what to prepare for.
For sure.
Benefit in that too.
Yeah. Okay, so Jackson, I want to back up a little bit. You mentioned we're not at the point really where we want to call the split, necessarily, because we do need 4 wins and we need a lot of other things to happen. We need a lot of people to lose along the way as well for us to have a shot at playoffs. Many fans, and I'm included in this, were calling for changes before they were made. And some of us were wondering, like, how, why is it that we waited this long? Do you think we waited too long in this? And is this something where, you feel like you guys are going to chalk this up as a lesson learned and we're going to change earlier? Or are you feeling confident in the timing of the changes that you've made?
Our coaching staff made a decision kind of on the timing to optimize really for near term, which was going into, I think the complaint or the suggestion I've heard the most is, why didn't we try a change last week against 2 weaker teams in Clutch and Golden Guardians? Yeah. Ultimately, our coaching staff came to the decision that optimizing for lower risk and lower volatility, ideally, which you would assume with no roster change, was the best option to go into that weekend, believing that we could 2-0 based on our team skill. We believed we had more talent than those teams. And that would put us in a much better position to be able to experiment a little going into the TSM C9 weekend. Yeah. I think a lot of people say, oh, you threw Soligo into the fire. Whereas I think our perspective was actually much more like, we're incredibly not favored against these teams, so let's take the risk versus the other way around. So that was really the logic there. Did we make it too early? Should we have not made any change? I don't really know. I think obviously now we're in a little bit of a position too, where it's not just change for the sake of trying to make playoffs, but also change to say, we have to, at the end of the day, our chances of winning this split, our goal when we came into this season was, how do we win the split? Or how do we go to Worlds and do even better? And we're very, very far from that now. So I think a huge piece of the decisions we make now in the next few weeks are, how do we put ourselves in a position with more knowledge about our guys to build the best roster for summer, or have the best roster for summer. And there are obviously a lot of things we could do in terms of keeping the roster exactly the same, all the way to trading everyone, and it'll probably be somewhere in between, or using academy guys or whatever. Yeah. So I think a big part of it now too is, we want to see what our guys are capable of, see how they fit together, and be a little bit, we're trying to win and we're trying to make playoffs, but also have to be a little bit longer term minded.
Yeah. Backing up to what you said about the timing on Soligo and putting him in a situation where, you're against tough teams, so why not take the risk when we're not favored to win? I tend to agree with that, really, even from a player mentality standpoint. It's a little easier to go in there when the expectation is, hey, these are really strong teams and specifically strong matchups that you're going to be playing against. So, just kind of shake off those expectations and get loose, turn the nameplates off and see what you can do. I think that's kind of a healthy approach to have for them. And mentality with players is something that's obviously really tricky and you have to navigate around. But if it's up to me, I'm in the camp that's a good decision for him, so to kind of put him in where the expectation's not too high.
I think so. And I think he handled it well. Again, some people might spin that the other way, and at the end of the day, I think it's really about how the player feels about it. Mm-hmm. But our perspective is, let's take this risky change, see if it affects things, and maybe we come out with a win, if not 2. And again, I think we were really, really close. It's unfortunate.
On TSM. I will say though, he looked a little scared in the heist when they had that, the scene of Kelsey telling him he was going to start.
I think
he looked
that was
a little nervous.
A little bit of a secret. I think that was actually a reshoot. The initial conversation happened off camera, out of respect for this.
You should know how much we're reading into every second of every detail.
I actually don't know that for sure, but we had talked about it, and
that's great.
Obviously, we want to make great content for you guys. We're also going to prioritize these conversations happening the way they need to.
Right.
So
to me, I just thought he looked cool as a cucumber. He was like, "All right, great."
That's kind of his
put
style.
me in, coach.
I know.
Pretty calm dude.
That's the feeling I get from him.
Yeah.
It shows.
Okay, and I wanted to ask one more kind of stylistic question for the team, since this is something that on Twitter and in chat people have been asking us to ask, and it's something that I've been curious about too. So I did want to bring it up. Obviously, you are not Prawley, so maybe not the ideal person to answer this question, but maybe you can provide some sort of insight for us. There hasn't been, when it comes to how the team is geared, there hasn't been a ton of play around the bot lane, especially early game, right? Like we went, I think it was 6 weeks into the split before we saw a pre-10-minute bot lane gank from Anda. Is this a decision, to your knowledge, that's coming from Prawley, from the team's general strategy, or from the players independently? Is this something that you guys are looking at trying out? What's your position on playing around bot lane?
So I think I have to be careful here for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to reveal anything that would help anyone else. For all those team FlyQuest scouts watching Hunter talk.
Oh yeah, dude, they're all over. Every other team is watching this right now.
But the more important reason would be I don't fully know. It was a question that I asked our coaching staff, so I think I sometimes wonder the same things you guys do. I think the best answer I can probably give is we try everything in scrims. You're seeing on stage 5% probably of the games we play, if not less. And if we're not doing something that seems pretty obvious, it's probably that we've tried it a lot and it's been ineffective. And sometimes it's dependent on the meta. Sometimes it's dependent on the opposing team. Sometimes it's dependent on the game state where we plan on doing something and it doesn't work for X or Y or Z. Sometimes it's a synergy thing or how effective ganks can be. Like there's so many things. Obviously, it's something that worked for us in the past. It's something that Medios and Aphro had a ton of success with in the past. I think people will probably call back to that.
Yeah.
I think the game is very different now. The meta is very different now. It's something that Team Liquid does really well. But I think, again, if you see something and you're wondering kind of why, unless it's really out there, it's probably something that we've tried and not had a ton of success with.
Yeah. That was one of the questions in the Ask Me Anything, the whole, what do you want your fans to know about the team that maybe they get wrong? That was something that you alluded to there. We're considering all these things and we've tried all of these things. Just because you don't see it on stage doesn't mean we haven't thought of it.
Yeah, I think last, what was it, Worlds or Summer Split, people are on the why isn't Someday on a carry? Like Someday didn't want to play carries. Like he wanted to play tanks because he felt like it was the best way for us to win. And we had tried playing carries a ton and it wasn't working.
Right.
So I think it's like, the Reddit analysts, like, why can't you guys
like, hey, I've got an idea. Bang's
so
good,
much
right?
about why don't we just feed Bang and do exactly what we did in Spring Split when the team is different and the game is different? And we're trying a lot. We try so many things that never see stage play. Could we be more risky, or should we take more risks, I should say, or try more out there things? Maybe that would help. But again, it's not for like I didn't think about we should try to get Bang fed.
Yeah.
didn't come up.
What do you mean? Define fed. What are you talking about? Well, and here's my thought on it.
Might not be a satisfying answer, but
when you look at the plays, the decisive plays from our games, it's typically not because we don't have enough damage or because we don't, Bang can't. This is Bang hard enough, right? Like it's typically because it is now. It's typically because of just the calls that are made, right? And I think whether Bang has another, 2,000 gold to his name, there's still plays that have defined some of our recent games that wouldn't change the outcome on. So to me, it doesn't feel like, is that a strategy to try? Of course. Is it the strategy that is clearly going to solve the problems that we're running into? I would say I have no reason to think that, right?
Yeah. If I had to assess, we have a lot of problems. I think at the very, very core, we clearly have a problem with decisiveness. And that, if you don't have decisiveness, it doesn't really matter how you're playing. Like any comp is going to struggle. You're going to struggle to take Baron. You're going to struggle to team fights. You're going to struggle to engage. Really, the only thing that I think can work really well is reactive play, which ironically enough, we've been pretty good at, I think. So it's a little less to me about, man, if I think I've said this before, but I get really frustrated when people retroactively blame the draft. I think there's a very small amount of professional League of Legends games that are determined by the draft. Other people might disagree with me, but I find that it's really like teams are trying to play to their win condition, and when a team drafts something and doesn't play effectively to that win condition, it looks super bad. And people will say, "Oh, you picked Jace, or you did this, or you didn't gank bot enough, or X, Y, Z." I think it's usually an execution thing, and we're not executing. That's our weakness. It's not necessarily a playstyle thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say, in fairness to the Reddit analysts of the world and the amateur podcast hosts of the world, it's really difficult to see some of these things play out and like not understand. Like, okay, we haven't seen this, so we don't know if it's going to work or not. But it seems to us like it's going to work, so why aren't we doing it? So it's like kind of a tricky thing to write. Like I don't know I don't know how big of a football fan you are, but it's like you think about the Seahawks and Patriots Super Bowl in like I think it was 2016, where instead of giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch, right, they throw the pass, it gets intercepted.
What are you doing? You're idiots.
Exactly. You know what I mean? It just seems like something that's like this has to work. This has to be a change. So I understand where they're coming from because I am in that class of person myself. Maybe not so much with the draft, but with the other things. It's difficult to see. That's why I'll wrap up my point by saying that's why I'm glad to see you out there putting that thought, online for people like, hey, we are thinking about these things. Yeah. They just haven't worked out when we've tried them in scrims or whatever. Like, I appreciate that message. So thank you.
I mean, maybe the last point I'll make on that, this point at least, is I'm as frustrated as the fans are, as you guys are. And I asked our coaching staff a lot of questions. We're not just like sitting here idly like, oh, we suck, it isn't working.
Wonder what we'll try next week.
Maybe it'll magically be better next week.
Yeah.
I think Prawley is a really, really thoughtful guy who I spent a lot of time challenging. And I think that's part of my job, is to challenge him on his entire approach. People, I think right now, a lot of people are asking why we aren't looking at a change there more seriously. And I think independent of anything else, it's the middle of the split, and that's your best answer. But also, I think Prawley in our book earned a lot of credit last year. We put a lot of faith and trust in him, and obviously it wasn't just him. We had amazing players who contributed, but I think he earned enough credit for us to work with him through a difficult time.
100%. Yeah.
As we try to kind of bounce back. And does that mean I'm just like, hey, probably do whatever you want? Like, it doesn't matter. We'll win magically by the end of summer. Of course not. But again, I'm spending a lot of time pushing our players, trying to get to the bottom of this. I think we're in a position we've never been in as an organization in our short time, which is we are really, really struggling, and we have a lot of big problems, and the solution isn't as obvious as it sometimes is.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, this seems, yeah.
Well, maybe then we can tie a bow on this by, you're mentioning the struggles right now and how that's not where you thought you'd be. Can you talk a little bit about expectations versus reality in this split, for you guys, maybe for NA as a whole, because it's been kind of a crazy split if we're being honest.
Yeah. Our approach with League of Legends, we aren't in a ton of esports. Cloud9's in 11 games. Our approach with esports is, for the games we're going to pour a ton of resources and time into making sure we are elite. That is the goal. In Call of Duty, that's going really well right now. It wasn't in December. We were struggling a ton, and we made some changes, and things really started to click. Obviously, in League, that is not the case. We are not a wilt over and give up, call off the season group. I think to assume any kind of meaningful change in the very short term is probably somewhat unrealistic. When I say meaningful change, I mean going from 10th place to 2nd place or competing in the finals. We still want to win the summer split, and we still think we can. That might sound delusional. Team Liquid is incredibly good, and I think quite a bit ahead. I think C9's a good team. I think Team Liquid is way better. And I think they might be the best North American team we've seen. It's obviously really early on in the year. But that being said, we're still gonna try. I think our near term though has to be a lot of questioning, a lot of experimentation, and trying to put ourselves in a position over the next 2 months so that we can come into summer notably strengthened. And at least if we don't have everything figured out, a clear kind of breakdown of where are our core issues, where do we need to focus and grow versus just like everything is up for grabs. So I think that's where we kind of have to be. It's particularly difficult to be in a position where if you're Equifox and your team's expected to be 7th or 8th and you're 9th, okay, that's relatively tracking. It's incredibly disappointing for us and for our fans and probably for the broader community. I know a lot of the casters have been, in my opinion, rightfully really critical of us because we had higher expectations. Everyone did. Our players are really, really strong. But I think that's part of what makes it so hard to kind of say, how do we fix our problems? It's not like, oh man, we don't have enough talent. Like I don't think, some people might disagree, but I don't really think at the end of the day that's the core problem. Do we have players who are making mistakes and struggling in certain ways? Of course. I think the only team in the league who just outright you could just say like couldn't upgrade in talent is Team Liquid. Yeah. C9 is not like a super star-studded all-star team, but all of their players look better because they play together really, really well, and they obviously have a couple studs. So that's a bit long-winded, but that's kind of where we're at. I would love to try to make playoffs, and that's still really important for us, especially as we think longer term. Like, I think Worlds is still a possibility. Getting into the playoffs in spring makes that much, much easier. But it's definitely not going to be a situation where we just go all in on making playoffs and don't think about kind of the longer development. That's why you saw the biggest reason why you saw a change this week, which was, hey, let's see what we have here. And I think everyone can probably expect to see more of that over the next sometime before the split ends. Obviously, we get knocked out of playoffs, that really, really becomes relevant, and you probably see even more change. But it's our job now to learn, what do we have? Can we make it work with the guys we have? Do we need to make trades? Is it a mindset thing? We're working on bringing in some other help on kind of the mental and psychological side. Is it a coaching staff approach problem? Is it like, what are all these issues? And we've got basically until June-ish to get through those and come in ready.
Yeah. Well, that's a tall order, man. Like, and let me tell you, nothing, I wanted nothing more than for the analyst preseason to be proven wrong about this team, because they're like, yeah, I've got them 4th or I've got them 3rd. And I was like, nah, dude, wait. They're going to win whole thing.
I wish we were in 3rd.
So I lament that lost opportunity so much, but you know, it sounds like maybe you guys got to take everybody to like Belize and put them on a ropes course for a couple days or something like that and do some soul searching. I don't know, but it's certainly a huge challenge. And I've said this on the show before, like, I do not envy you, because holy cow, man, there's so much to sort through there. So many tough decisions, things that are going to affect good people, good players, good coaching staff, good, just good people that you don't want to see anything suboptimal happen to. So we wish you the best of luck as you do that, you sort through that and face those challenges. And dang, it's rough, but we're pulling for the team, obviously.
Maybe one last note I would add is, if you guys are frustrated that I'm not giving perfectly clear answers on everything, I think the biggest reason, outside of maybe strategic reasons, is that I really enjoy this group of guys we have. I think one of the hardest parts about struggling so much is that, like, this is probably my favorite group of players we've ever had. And they're just all so great to work with. And that has been really, really challenging. I would have loved to see this iteration of the teamwork. I think obviously that's just unfortunately not the case. But if we aren't saying explicitly everything, part of that is, and we've touched on this in the past, but we want to do right by our players. And that's something we're going to continue to do, even if people are frustrated with us not sharing everything.
Yep. Well, that's
one thing I'll add is, and this is a separate note, but it would have been easy, given how this split has gone, to just kind of clam up and go into lockdown mode. So another set of kudos for continuing to talk to people and even though there aren't clear answers always, just keeping the conversation going, because I haven't heard a single person say that 100 Thieves have continued to make the same mistakes from last season, which was not being clear enough.
Yeah.
And
at least we could win games, but
yeah, we were winning games. It's pick your problem, I guess. But
yeah.
I think it would be compounding if it was we were losing games and no one had any idea what was going on or what the team was thinking or anything like that. So
yeah, and you guys can expect more too. I'm very self-aware about the fact that me answering these questions is not the same as Prawley or even Nate Shot answering these questions, and I think we'll have more of that too. But in the meantime, kind of trying to sub in while Prawley is hard at work. So hopefully we'll have more.
Yeah.
Maybe even we'll have when we win Summer Split, we'll have Prawley come on and do the victory tour.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes, we'd like that very much. One final question.
Yeah.
And this is honestly, maybe the most important question we could ask is, when's the Sup Fan shirt coming?
Oh man, I don't have a great gauge of where the demand is, and I'm still not totally sure how Nate
let me settle that for you. The demand is red hot.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do some real customer surveys. And I don't know if I can use the 100 Thieves branding. There might be some lawsuits be waiting, but yeah, we'll see. We might have. I'm not gonna.
We can do it. We can do a co-brand. We'll put it on the 100 Talk.
Yeah, there we go.
The next mug has the Sup Fan song.
Once I figured out our League of Legends team and a few other things over here at 100 Thieves, we'll go full influencer and do Sup Fans. But for now, work to be done.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Well, we will let you see to that work. Again, thank you so much for being here. It's great to hear directly from a team source, a little bit about some of the tough things that are going on, and we appreciate you being candid about that as to the extent that that's possible. And like I said, we're all pulling for you guys. We're pulling for this team, and just keep doing what you're doing and grinding, man.
Yep, we got your back.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
And thank you all for watching or listening. Like, having people that I think going a little bit up from just League of Legends, like, my favorite part about this job is that we have people who love this stuff so much and are so excited about it and are so passionate. It's obviously easier to support a winning team. So for those of you guys who've stuck around and kept with us, even when you give us criticism, which I think generally we try to welcome, it helps through the hard times. And I know it's true for the players too. So thanks again. Thank you guys. I wish I still want to come on this podcast and do a longer kind of fun, normal conversation.
You on. Yeah.
But hopefully we can do that after we've turned things around a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll it for sure.
Keep up the awesome pods. I'm a weekly listener. Monday mornings usually. I'm usually not live, but my community.
That's why we do it Sunday night. It's our Monday morning fans.
Exactly.
That's
Smart guys.
That's right. Cool. All right. Thank you so much, Jackson. You have
Thanks,
a good
guys.
night.
Have a good rest of. Yeah. I'll enjoy the rest of the pod tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, man. Take care.
Peace.
All right. So that was a lot, man.
That was a lot.
It was a lot of interesting stuff going on.
Thanks to Jackson for going long. We I think we advertised 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, we told him this could be a 15-minute conversation,
but he was cool. He was super cool. He said however long it goes, it's fine.
Man,
there's a lot to talk about.
There is. I would be remiss if I didn't draw attention back to the whole concept of having like a 6-man roster was the long-term vision.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to really reiterate that with him or clarify that with him, but that's very interesting. We certainly appreciate Jackson coming on, so thank you. And let's take the rest of this show tonight. We can talk a little bit about the games, a little bit about some general questions, because there are some things that are easier to talk about in that context, and some things that aren't. Let's start with TSM really quick. So the TSM game, I think, is the one that's particularly frustrating. Right.
Yes.
The story of the story of the game is we're out to just this massive early game lead, right? Where everything seemed to be going right and the tide seemed to be turning. Someday himself was up like 2,500 early. Like Someday basically was like almost full item up.
Which has happened before for us, where our entire lead is concentrated into Someday. He's just like a white hot ball of gold lead, and it's one of those where I'm like, all right, Sunday's doing well, and then at the same time, I'm like, so if Sunday's not there, what you're telling me is it's completely even.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of
often
crazy.
Sunday's off on his island doing Sunday things, like, split pushing and yeah.
And especially because that was a counter pick, by the way. The Riven was counter picked, and he still was able to dominate on the Aatrox so much. So it begs the question, right? Like, this is not the first time we've seen Someday get a large individual lead and things going very, very right for us in the early game. So why can't we snowball these leads? Why are we not converting?
Yeah, I think it's probably that's like a micro version of the macro question here, which is just why can't we snowball leads? I do remember hearing, I think it was on maybe the Dive this week, they were talking about in NA, it's I think it's less predictive than usual, an early lead that you'll win the game. And so I think you've brought up bounties before and just how the impact that has on play, and it gets in people's heads, and there's an actual material impact when people start dying. So that could be part of it. There's just more rubber banding with gold flying back and forth. I think when I look at the close-in version with Someday in particular, that Riven counter pick really did kind of start to come out toward the mid to late game. And even though he was up big gold, the way the trades were going, the extra mobility, Riven was always just a step ahead of the full stun or the full combo, or he couldn't actually convert it into a kill. And so I think what you got was he had all this extra gold. He couldn't quite turn that into a lane that was pushing out of control, because Riven would show up, get some lane clear, get a trade in, and then run off, liquor wounds, and come back to fight again. So,
well, is it a problem that the Riven was creating that split push pressure that just brought Someday off of whatever the team was doing on the other parts of the map, right? So it's always like his attention was needed somewhere. Like, is there a rotation that needs to be happening there to because they mentioned, like, if they 4v4 without Someday, then that could go either way right now. And probably even it could go south. So do we need to set up a rotation, build that in so that he can be there and the team can just make an aggressive play and then make him pay even more?
Yeah. And I think maybe that the question there is, do we abandon the split push, knowing that because of the matchup or because of whatever it is, it's not going to work for us. After a certain time, it became kind of clear that it wasn't going to translate into the kind of lead you would expect from that much gold advantage. So maybe it was time to try to get some more team fights going in some way. But I think, to your point, it's a tough, between a rock and a hard place, and you got the Riven down there just absolutely tearing up lane and putting pressure. Well,
it's interesting because it's like we have Soligo in there to switch up the play style, to be a different kind of presence, to hold lane a little bit more, and maybe let us kind of hold on to mid lane on the map. But we're seeing kind of the same exact problems destroy us, right? So, never mind the early game leads, because we also had a healthy early game lead against C9.
Yeah. Right.
Never mind that. We're just not able to go anywhere after those. And some of that I'm beginning to think is just on the players doing some questionable things. I mean, one of the things I saw, again, was a super questionable death from Aphro against TSM. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Yes.
When he was in that bush, and it was like he didn't even react to the first damage that came through.
Like, the hits started coming, he just stood there.
And he was just there, yeah.
It looked like he was all tabbed.
Yeah, like, and then Someday salvaged it by, like, sneaking the Drake afterwards.
Solo the Drake.
So it didn't end up feeling quite as bad, but holy cow, man, like, what was that? Like, was he basing and then looked away from his screen or something?
Looking at, like, nothing that I can come up with is gonna sound like a good alternative to what we would expect for him to be doing at that time.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he was checking out the shop, playing his build. I don't know. It was very strange. And he got caught out. In a bad spot. And maybe one of the possibilities is he just realized he got caught out and there's absolutely nothing he could do, so he just didn't. But
I don't buy that possibility. I just think that
you think he was actually literally doing something else?
I don't know, but I think that he is having a very, very bad split, and the questions around his level of play are getting more and more valid, and man, that hurts, because what a guy. Like, I love that guy, and he's a lot of the reason why I was drawn into the 100 Thieves story at the beginning. But is it time for him? Has he aged out a little bit? I mean, I'm asking myself that question more and more every week.
Yeah, I think that you have to. And the thing, I mean, that we've brought this up many times, but spring split MVP. So a year ago, he was having an MVP split.
Right.
And now, like, his highlight reel is more question marks, where it's like, well, what happened there? And I think you got to ask the question. And maybe it's that he's just lost a passion for it. At the start of this, I think when this first started to slide, the split started to get away from us. I kind of put it out there of like, you just hope that these guys who have been in the game for a long time, like they still have the mental fortitude to put their nose back to the grindstone and try to make this right. And maybe he just doesn't. And I don't think there's any blame to go around there. I'm not saying like he should be trying harder, because I think the reason people burn out and kind of just get tired of stuff is because they just can't anymore. It's not because you're just living
spent
collecting the check. It's because you literally can't.
Yeah.
And no one can speak for him. All we can do is wonder, but you wonder, especially when you see plays like that.
Yeah, you do. And I would say the reason I bring this up is because, we're at this point in the split where it seems fairly lost, and we're not shutting it down. You heard Jackson say that, but the split very much feels lost. I think we're going to see that be an area where we could possibly see some off-season moves, after the split. I don't know what those moves are at the moment because I haven't thought it through, but certainly I think support is a slot where we could make a substitution, make a change, make a trade, and see some improvement, which I never thought I would say at the beginning of the split. I never picture myself saying that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And, I think that's probably the hardest one for a lot of the Thieves fans. You just kind of get to that point. And again, it's like, none of these are there easy answers to, but I think that's at least one that we've got to be looking at and thinking about, and kind of scouting around a little bit to see what we can find.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have erred on the side of supporting players and giving them more time, as kind of as a matter of policy almost. I don't want to be known as someone who overreacts to stuff, and my opinion is, we need to just burn it all down right away. But I've been fighting that for a while, man, and I think that's going to be an area of serious concern for the team. Well, yeah,
we've got to, if you want to get better in a hard situation, you have to be willing to ask the hard questions.
Yeah, and the question I think is, are the intangibles, like, the story's always been the intangibles outweigh the level of play, right? And the question is, has the level of play dropped significantly that the intangibles no longer outweigh that?
Yeah, and I think one thing we always gave him a lot of credit for, and I think this is community wide, everybody who watches LCS, is the shot calling, and that is not one of our strengths at this point. There are things that we're good at still. That list is growing shorter, but shot calling, I don't think anybody would say right now is even like in the questionable column. So
yeah,
you just got to do the math on it, and I think if that's not one of the things he's contributing, like a competitive advantage through shot calling, you got to think about it.
Sam Brown in YouTube chat asks, do we think Stunt gets a chance before the end of the split? I personally do not think we see that this split. It takes a lot for a duo lane to gel and to be built up. And it just feels like there's not enough time for Bang and Stunt to do anything worthwhile for the rest of the split. So I don't think we see that change. However, like I said, I do think it's a very possible area of change for in between splits and ahead of summer. So that's where I stand on it.
What I will say, plug for the Academy team here. Safe Brom looked clean in the Friday game. He hit some crazy Braum plays, Stunt did. So, I mean, the guy can play. I personally don't know if I'd say he is, differential from Aphro, but I am positive that they'll be thinking about and asking about it. Personally, I would say if the split is fully lost, then I would bet that Stunt starts to scrim at least with the team and potentially gets called to the stage.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to C9. Let's talk about the C9 game a little bit, what we saw there. One of the things that we've alluded to as a major problem is some of the team fighting and the decisions we make as we enter those fights or disengage from those fights.
Yeah.
And my question now is, clearly in the C9 game, that's where we saw the turn, right? Is just these team fights that we could not win. And I saw us getting spread out so far from each other that we couldn't help each other. Whereas C9 sitting in the middle and can go and help anybody at any second.
Right.
We had these weird team fights around River where we're literally surrounded by C9 players and they're all on the same page and willing to engage on the same person. And we're like literally I'm sorry, I said that backwards. C9 is surrounded by us, excuse me.
Yeah.
And they're able to clump up and kind of help, but we're so far away from each other that, we can't move over and help. And it's not really an unusual thing. We often get split in the jungle into 2 or 3 groups, and those things just it seems fairly basic, but at the same time, you have to ask yourself, is the team fighting for the team salvageable in this split?
Yeah. It's so interesting, kind of that slip of the tongue that you had, because the way it feels is like we're surrounded. Cloud9 is everywhere. Yeah. What do we do? It's like we are the thinly spread ring around their just death ball, and they're just shooting spells out, knocking us down. This was such a weird game for me. I was watching it, pretty much up until we went live, just because I had a lot of stuff on today.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had 20 minutes left in my VOD. It was, I think, 4-4. And I was like, this could legit go either way. It's pretty close. And in my gut, I was like,
nah. Yeah.
But I was like, on paper, I don't see how the whole VOD is over in 20 minutes, because right now, a lot of buildings standing, even kills. Gold, I think, was maybe pretty close. So, yeah, the game was weird. It felt like there were just, and this is what good teams do, a couple team fights that went south for us, and that's all she wrote. And then, I think for me, the thing that jumped out to me the most was I just felt like Anda was really overextending, maybe. And I think that's a little bit of what it seemed like to me in this game was causing us to, our positioning to be way off. Is he would jump in, and then it's like whoever is standing next to him is like, oh, we gotta follow that guy. So it seems like a communication issue. It seems like there's probably just not that level of cohesion that you see, especially with a team like Cloud9, who I feel like fights really well together. Yeah. So is it salvageable? Not without changes. I really don't think that without changes, I don't think that this unit is capable. This didn't seem to me like, well, we made a bad choice. I think it was just we played exactly the way we've been playing, which is a little bit separate. And I think exactly what you described is what we get when we play that way.
The hesitancy in team fights is something that Jackson brought up. He said, we need to work on being decisive. That is definitely, I think, the story of the Baron push by C9 that ended this game. I mean,
and TSM, actually.
Yeah, well, TSM too, but that there's a lot more that was going on there. There was a Baron steal in that game.
Oh, the Baron push. Sorry, the Baron take for TSM was,
yeah, the Baron push by C9 that eventually ended the game. I mean, I don't know about you, but I did not see that ending the game when it started. I was like, okay, they're going to take, an inhib. Maybe they'll rotate over and get a second inhib. They ended the game there. And there was no willingness to pick the fight. It was almost like there was no urgency there to say, hey, this could actually turn into the end of the game. And they should have known that when the TP starts coming out, right? You can see that TP. That this is the push, and you have to do something. And they didn't really even make an attempt.
Yeah.
And by the time that had gotten out of control, it was too late to do anything. You see Bang doing his best to get a kill at the end. Kudos to him, man. I like to see him going down swinging. But yeah, it just, there was nothing there. Why did we roll over and die during that Baron push?
And that's not the first one of those that we've done that with. And that's a troubling tendency of ours as well, and it's been called out just a couple times now where it's like, I think the most recent one was against TL, where Double Lift kind of went on record saying like, well, thought they would contest us for this, and then figured they'd contest for that, and then since they gave us both of those, thought for sure they'd at least contest that, and they didn't, so we won. Like, that was how that game went. So yeah, I think it is the decisiveness, and I feel like we're starting to get at it a little bit. And as we talked about, that is such a hard thing. I don't think that you can easily just swap a player and become a more decisive team unless that player does the things that Jackson was talking about, unless they routinely say, you go there, I'm doing this, we have to, everybody in now, right? Either we stop them here or we die. Like, and that's, it's better than just standing around the Nexus as it drops. That was the TSM one, right? Where the Nexus fell, and I think we had everybody up or 4 people up. It's like, come on, man, get in there.
Yeah. Well, I think since you're going there with roster changes and stuff, maybe that's worth a little bit of time to dissect the Soligo situation a little bit more, talk about other roster things, and then we can wrap up the show. But so we talked with Jackson a little bit about Soligo. I mean, how are we feeling about Soligo? What's your honest opinion on how he performed this weekend and his prospects for staying in the LCS going forward for this split and possibly next?
Yeah, I'll pick it up where I left off my previous comment, which is he does not in any way solve our decisiveness issue. And I think that was clearly on display here with these 2 games this weekend.
And let me interject with a listener take, since that's a good opportunity for it. At Leech Terrell says, decision-making, play style, and jungle are our main problems, not our mid lane, and I'm sticking to it. He says, everyone says Soligo plays well, and we still lost with a huge lead.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree with that in general. What the interesting thing I think is in mid, and this is another point that we hit recently on who he is. I don't feel like and maybe it's just because when the team is in the state of disarray that it's in, having a team fight oriented or a team oriented, top bot lane oriented mid laner just isn't feasible, right? Like, if your whole play style is to support others and to build their leads, and if we can't get leads or if we can't do anything with the leads, I just don't know that he's able to kind of take advantage of that. So I think that what I would say is, I think Soligo, while he doesn't fix those problems, he might create pressure in an area for the other team that helps to diminish how badly those problems are hamstringing us. If we can create a lot of lane pressure in mid, then maybe you do have a Nocturne camped out in mid for the first 20 minutes. And maybe you do have, bot lane traveling up to mid to try to take some of that pressure off. That can help out in other areas. So personally, I want to see more Soligo. I want to see more of him. And I'm really hopeful that if he does get a chance to play against either Fly's tough. I mean, that's another matchup that is tough for sure with Pobelter. I think Echo Fox, the dude will just smash. So if he gets the chance, I'm really interested to see how that impacts our overall performance.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of what you're saying. I thought it was really nice to have someone who felt like they were creating pressure in lane. I think sometimes my take on that with who he is overblown a little bit, because in my head I have it that like who he's losing lane all the time and
right.
Just kind of like forfeiting that lane. It's not always true. Like when you go back and look at like what the CS is doing, how the turrets are stacked up, like that's not true 100% of the time, and it may be barely true a majority of the time even. But I just felt more comfortable about the status of our mid lane with Soligo in there, so that's a thing. But the other side of the coin is and Touch My Coconuts in Twitch chat said this. He said, I thought he did well given the circumstances, and in parentheses opponents, like talking about like Bjergsen and Niski, but he does not help the team game late, and I felt like that for sure. With maybe a rare exception, and I did want to call this out on the show. During the TSM game when we were pushing with Baron later, and we had taken mid inhib, I believe, and we rotated up top to take top inhib and tower. Mm-hmm. And they turned a team fight on us that went pretty bad and had us in a retreat. And Bjergsen was fully online as LeBlanc during that time. And he was ready to just dive into the team. Soligo ulted him and took him down to almost nothing, almost got the kill off on Bjergsen and forced him off the team. I'm telling you right now, without that was an ace. Yeah. And so I did want to call that out. Like, there were times where Soligo made a significant difference. Yep. At the same time, it feels like when we're talking about closing out a game, I wasn't sure. It didn't feel like he was adding much. So that's the other side of the coin. Like, then again, none of our players are really helping us to close out.
That's the thing, right? It's so hard to say, well, Soligo didn't help us close out the game. But then we've talked about Aphro, right? And it's just like, in isolation, how much can you expect one person to do? How much can you pin a team-wide issue on one person? So it is really hard. But the mechanical stuff, like what you talked about with Bjergsen, there's a play there where Anda was trying to contest Scuttle Crab, and it was, I can't remember the exact game. I want to say maybe it was C9. Anda was on J4, whichever game that was, or maybe it was both. Either way, he ults the enemy team jungler who's trying to come out, jump out. I think it was Sejuani, jump out and get the kill. Mm-hmm. And he would have allowed Anda to escape. And Anda was escaping. And then he kind of took a step back and put himself back in range and got killed that way. But it's another one.
You mean Anda did, right?
Anda took
yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I do remember that. That was today in the C9 game.
Again, it's like, oh, dang. Soligo jumped in there in a situation that was lost and gave us a way out of it. And I think that's through the mechanical play. Like, I think he is that level of proficient, at least with Lysandra, to pull off plays like that. And the frustration, of course, is that Anda still dies, and we still kind of come out of it limping. Yeah. But the guy does stuff like that, and that's what I want to see more of. Because I think if you get the other stuff figured out, he could be really good to have. Contributing, because he's going to create opportunities for us in the same way we talked about Sunday creating opportunities. Yeah.
Well, an interesting tidbit on Soligo that I'll add, and then we can talk about one or two other things. Bdingerim in Twitch chat says, when watching Reaper's stream of the VOD review, he stated that they specifically first picked Syndra in order to tilt Soligo, as they knew it was his most played champ. Which it's kind of interesting to see teams targeting that. I mean, I think you see a potential weakness and you want to step on it.
Yeah.
So it is admirable, certainly, about how he held up through these games. So I'm in the keep Soligo in camp. I think that we made one change, and we saw not really a difference in the overall like play out of the game, but we saw a different flavor of what our mid looked like. And for whatever reason, even if it just was the other players rallying to help him to come to his defense, like because he needs more help, but we looked more coordinated early game and mid, and we saw Anda being more impactful with ganks and counter ganks in mid lane early. Yeah. So like I said, maybe that's because Soligo needs it and can't survive without it or whatever, but for whatever reason, that ended up being a positive for us in the early game. Still, mid-game, late-game questions are there and persistent, but for right now, I'm looking to see Soligo stay in.
Yeah, and think about this, right? Jackson talked about having a six-man roster is somewhere important goals. I don't see any reason we change that necessarily, because I do think that who he has a lot he can contribute to a team, given the team is able to play to his strengths. So I hope, I guess if it works out, I could see there being a benefit in that, right? And who knows what will happen? I mean, trades happen, all these kinds of things happen, but I think that six-man roster is an interesting idea, and I still think it could work, right? If we get some of this other decision making, decisiveness, that kind of stuff there, then who he could be somebody to have on the bench or in given the matchup, to kind of exploit a team's weaknesses.
Yep. So final question of the night then.
Yes.
So put on your Prolly hat right now.
Yes.
What are you doing in terms of roster changes for the end of spring split? So specifically talking about the next 2 weeks of games, what are you going to do if you're making those calls?
All right, I'll give you the short answer. I'm hesitant to put in Fragus because I do think that he is a super aggressive player. We saw him go up against Rush in last week's, is that Friday? Ooh, time's slipping away.
Yeah.
Friday's game against Echo Fox Academy. And Rush gave him a lot of trouble. He gave him a lot of problems. And Rush is very good. So I'm not in any way trying.
Excuse me.
You get a lot of heat if you make a change and Fragus goes 0-6-2, right? That's where people look at you and they say, well, you weren't technically out, so why did you throw the kitchen sink in, right? Like, why are you messing with everything? So I think I hold there. I like Soligo. If I'm probably, I'm keeping him in. I think we have at least one game that looks very favorable with Fox next week on Sunday. And I like our chances in FlyQuest. FlyQuest is struggling lately. So I think there's the opportunity there. And I think we're going to have a better opportunity with Soligo than we would with Huhi. Just given the team with Huhi on the roster, I would say has looked worse than it did with Soligo.
So I get the point that if we're against opponents that, like Echo Fox, who's not doing well, maybe we have a good shot at them.
Oh,
so
let's
not mess this up. Yeah, it's like FlyQuest seems pretty good, man, and we have to get wins against teams that have a better record than us and are demonstrably better than us. I am gonna disagree with you, and I say I think we should give Fragus a shot along with Soligo, and I don't know how that's gonna play out. I'm not saying that that's going to solve everything, but if we are looking at how do our players play, what play style do they create in the different combinations, then we need to do that. We need to know that. We need to solve that. And if, Fragus comes in and he's able to be super aggressive early, and instead of getting like a gold lead through superior pathing and farming, the things that Anda does to generate leads, he's able to get a couple of kills off, maybe that just is a different aspect of the team.
Lane.
Maybe that unlocks some things. Yeah, who knows? But I think we have to, because do you really want to go into summer in a situation where like the trades haven't really worked out and no one was really available when we asked about them, and then we're stuck with this the same roster as we have, but we don't know if they're better if you put both Soligo and Fragus in. It's like, for me, I kind of feel like now is the time to figure that out, do that experiment, and gain as much knowledge as you can about that, because the split, I mean, it's really, really going to be a tough road forward, so we have to change something.
Yeah. That's a compelling argument, and I could see it from the perspective of maybe in the same way that we're talking about all the things Soligo has done and changed that we didn't expect. Maybe there are things like that Fragus brings, and maybe one of them is, more room for our bot lane to get ahead. Perhaps I could see it. So I don't know, man. Like you said, tough questions. I don't envy probably right now. But yeah, it looks bad if you take a chance on Fragus and that chance does not go out the way you hope it does. That looks bad.
Yeah. Well, it's like, do you want to lose early, or do you want to have a shot?
Right.
Because if we don't put Fragus in, then following our current MO, we're just going to lose late game, even if we have a great early game. So
that's true, man. I really don't feel like Anda looked good this
man.
weekend. Yeah, I don't feel like Anda looked good. That's tough.
Yep. Well, like you said, we've got FlyQuest coming up this Saturday and Echo Fox on Sunday. I think there's a good chance that we 1-1. I think Echo Fox is spiraling, like you said, and we could do something. We're kind of overdue for a game where things kind of go right. You know,
I would say,
it just feels like we're overdue, and sometimes there's something to that. So perhaps we'll get a 1-1 this weekend. I'm not sure. I think we may be out of error, like out of margin for error. So I think we need to win out, basically, and get some favors called in to make it to playoffs. So we'll see after this week.
Top of the table keeps winning, and that means that everyone else is still kind of where we're at, within reach at least. But yeah, I think we're going to need some favorable results to make it to playoffs. And then once we get to playoffs, like, my goodness.
Yeah.
We do not have – I do not know what the max strength roster looks like right now for us.
It would be really interesting to see like a best of 5 with this team anyway. Like, these are just like little one-off games. Like, what does a best of 5 look like? I don't know. So if nothing else, like I hope we make playoffs so that we can see that.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, if nothing else, here's kind of where I'm at. I think Soligo's an exciting player. And I took notes this weekend. I hadn't taken notes in a while. It felt good. It felt horrible to lose. But while the game was going, I was excited, and I was like on the edge of my seat, and I was biting my nails. But in a way, that it feels better than not being, right. The C9 game was definitely not as much of that, but the TSM game, man, I was hopeful. It's been a while. Yeah. So let's just, I mean, hold on to that. Hope we get another good result this weekend, and you know, it's positive. I think the academy squad is legit, and let's see what they can do. So
we're gonna have our fingers crossed.
I'm almost ready to say Fragus in. I don't know if I am.
Stand your ground, young sir.
I made my take, and I'll take it.
Yeah, you stay with your take. Yes. So a couple quick housekeeping things, then we'll wrap it up. So we had our 4th Academy cast this past week on Friday, as you mentioned. We are not sure if we're going to be back. There's a chance, I guess, that we would be there for maybe Thursday. It sounds like we're not sure. So hopefully we'll get a chance. I believe it's the last week of Academy regular season. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we don't really know what's going to happen going forward from there. But it's been a blast. And this week was especially fun because there was like an inexplicable 45-minute pause that happened like 2 minutes into the game. And basically Jordan and I just got roasted by Twitch chat for those 45 minutes for being old, for being uncool, for being all the things that we truly are. But man, that was a lot of fun. I had so much fun on that stream. So hopefully we'll get another shot at it. And then merch drop is rumored to be the end of this month / maybe early next month. So there's a lot to look forward to there. We haven't seen any glimpses of the new merch. That's confirmed at least. Jerseys, if you order the premium jersey, it should be shipping out sometime this month as well. So there'll be some little little feel good things to help drown your sorrows with how this split has gone so far. We certainly are not going anywhere, so we will see everybody next week. Thank you for listening. I think we had actually a lot of new listeners. Got a lot of notifications on Twitch. So you can follow us on Twitter at 100TalkPod. He's at Jordan_Wicker, WHICKER. We're on YouTube, so you subscribe to us there if you want to check out the VODs. We're also on pretty much any podcast platform that has any legs under it. So if you want Spotify, it's there. If you want Apple, it's there. If you want Google Play, it's there. Stitcher, TuneIn, whatever. We're there. You can find us. Subscribe, leave us ratings, make us feel good about ourselves because we are searching desperately for something to feel good about.
We're in it for the long haul. We're not going anywhere.
That's right.
We're just gonna ride this thing out. Be have faith. We'll get better.
Yeah. All right. And thank you to Mr. Papas 13 for the Twitch Prime sub. And I saw 1 or 2 other Twitch subs come through during the thing, so sorry I didn't call those out specifically. We love you guys, and we're looking forward to.
Thanks for the sub. Got a Mox.
Yeah, Mox for sure. One of the OGs of the show.
Yep.
But we're looking forward to seeing what's going to happen for the rest of this split and then talking to you guys about it. So blow up our Twitter and hang out with us on Twitch. Our gameplay streams of League will return very soon. I think this week even.
I would like that.
That's a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to doing that again. So everyone, have a great week and pray, make any sacrifices you want to make in the name of 100 Thieves doing better this weekend and somehow, making a playoff run.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell him how deeply to dabble. I'm going to leave that open to interpretation because something needs to happen. The one thing I'll say is don't go out and Nancy Kerrigan any of the other players. No physical attacks.
No, we don't need that. We don't need that. These guys are all.
There's a reference that no one will get for sure. Sure.
Tanya came out not too long ago. There's probably at least
okay. There you go. All right. Yeah. All right, everybody. That's it for the show. We will do this again soon. Thanks again. And we love you. Miss you already.